Hello there, adventurer, and welcome to my dungeon. Have a seat, grab some tea, as I treat you to a true legend of the realm, with hearts of ice. Scribed and narrated by yours truly, part-time lair boss and full-time nerd. There was a frost in the air. The sun stood low, the golden light felt warm in his tanned skin, and yet the wind carried a frigid sting. He stood at a marble balcony overseeing the once lavish gardens, now grey and dead. All the years of care and joy had put into them, wilted to dirt. The exotic flowers all froze to death, and soon so will they. The ivory Erlen host was approaching mercilessly, intent on putting them all to the sword, killing the very last land itself. The Satyrian rose survived the longest, but they wilted 2 nights ago. His fingernails dug deep into the palms of his hand, but there was no pain. He took a deep breath. He had to do something, anything, for there was nothing left worth saving. 64 years Sadul had served his people as the war master of Gidai. 64 long years of bloodshed over petty border disputes, over vanity and greed. He had seen his fill of bloodshed, shed Blake's worth of it. And for the first time of his long life, was at a loss of what to do. With an urgent step he made his way to the lavish royal quarters, shoving past the mute servants, which seemed to barely notice him. The braziers weren't lit, and the hallways lay silent before him. Gently he pushed open the heavy gold-embroidered satin curtains, entering the Queen Hierophant's chambers. "Mother," he said gently. The Queen sat slouched in a chair, staring absent-mindedly into the coals, and her despair was like a miasma in the air. Her hair was fatty and in disarray, clumped into strings. "Atrias?" A weak, hopeful voice called back. "No, mother, it is I, Sadul." "Atrias," he... Never mind. He grit his teeth as to keep his composure. The western shores have fallen. The messenger said we need to form a standard secret. A hesitation. The words laid heavy on his tongue. "You must invoke the goddess. We need her blessing. I don't think our soldiers stand a chance alone. Speak of pale devils freezing the very blood in your veins. And besides, the men are terrified. They need her guidance." There was a long pause before she looked at him, her eyes grey and veiled by the curse of the years. "She will not answer you. She refuses to even answer me." And it was true, he knew. The temples lay silent and the offerings had been rotting on the trays. She held her hands to stop the shaking. "Lady Celiana has abandoned us, Sadul." She merely stated the obvious, and yet the wound stung more than 100 blades. The goddess hadn't answered any prayers ever since the war began. It had only been a few years, but the people were devastated. No more games, no more funerals in the proper ways, no more night of the spirits. The world stood head for them. He turned and left. He didn't want her to see him like this. "This isn't over, mother. I will end this madness," he sweared. He had consulted the scholars and priests and any learned men and women he could find. He knew he asked the impossible of them, but there had to be a weapon, a power, any hope for them at all. He strode through the streets of the Kidathi, in his light robes, pondering the empty roads as if the cracked stones held the answers he so desperately sought. The palm trees had withered, and the sky was grey. The air was thick with rain. A storm was brewing in the far western shores. Lost in his thoughts, he made his way to the Grand Library. Walking in the middle of the promenade, barely anyone crossed his path, and those that did hurried into their homes, unnerved by the unnaturally cold wind. They were afraid. Rightfully so, he thought to himself. The days went by and grew colder and colder, but there was no solution in sight. He'd given royal decree across the realms and promised them the riches of centuries of prosperity, though none that heed his summons. He was sitting at night, sleepless, in his bed chambers, in his silken gown, pondering the holy night sky. Were they truly abandoned by the Lady of the Night? Despite not being well learned in the sacred astronomy, he could feel ill-importance just as his personal servant entered the room. Holding a candle, he peered into the dark. "Someone demands an audience, Lord Warmaster. You instructed me to inform you immediately." "Yes, Kadim, you did well. Sleep has forsaken me, and I shall meet the stranger immediately. Ready the atrium, and bring the finest wine for our guest." The young man returned with a nod of respect. "Yes, my War Master," and left to do Sadul's bidding. He was a fine young man, he thought. Vadim had served him well over the years, on the battlefield and off it. If they survived, this, he hoped, to see him grow into the title of War Master, following his footsteps. There was no worthy man of the title. He hoisted his large body from the soft feather bed, and threw on a dark silken gown. The stranger was sitting at a large table carved from sandstone. The wine had remained untouched. Vadim stood next to him in a light leather gambeson, his sword hand resting on his koppesh. He thought of the War Master of the Kedai at such a late hour. What is it you have so urgently tell to me that it cannot wait the coming of the dawn? He slowly prowled along the table, leaning on one strong hand in front of the strange man in a raggedy coat. There was something off about this one. Something could have been mistaken for a laugh came from underneath the hood. It has come to my master's attention that your majesty is in need of aid. He believes he might provide you with what you desire. Interesting. But you have not told me your name or the name of your master. I can tell you not from these lands, but it is custom you introduce yourself to the host of the house. Please. They once called me Tiberius, and I hail from way up north, the man called as he took off his hood, revealing the wild face of an old man. There was strange runes burned all over into the sickly pale flesh of this poor and slightly insane-looking wretch. But that no longer matters. Perhaps it never has. I am apprentice now to the one you call Kazarak. They came from the pitch-black pits your kind cast him in so many years ago. Luckily for you, he is not a vengeful man. He has charged me to bring you to him. The man grinned a yellow smile, and then the wretch stood up, revealing a limb not of flesh, but of polished black stone, whirring with a strange pitch, and made his way towards the exit. Sadul went after him and said, "Wait! How can I trust you, Tiberius of the North?" The wretch turned around. "You can't, but you also don't have a choice." They rode for 2 days northwards along the Kali River on a feathered bulwark. High instead he was gifted by the lake. The wretch guided the ways towards a rocky plateau and in between boulders. If you didn't know it was there, you would have never found it. A huge carved portal made from sandstone covered in strange symbols, portraying the face of some anguished deity. The old man lifted his prosthetic arm and drew a green runes into the air. Sadul could feel the witchcraft bristling in the dry desert heat as the door slowly opened and revealed a dark path into the bowels of the earth. Tiberius entered without hesitation, gesturing impatiently to follow him. "I didn't know you were a sorcerer," Sadul tried to break the silence as he stepped into the thick, dusty air. "That is because I am not," the man answered. "A scholar and a disciple, perhaps, but don't confuse us with errant warlocks," he snickered. "Lord Kazarak is so much more." The darkness felt almost alive, ravenous as the moor closed behind him, snuffing the tender light of the moon and the sacred stars. This realm was beyond Zelaner's influence, he thought. Tiberius conjured a pale golden flame in the palm of his hand, lighting the way deeper down. His hand reflexively wandered to the hilt of his koppesh. The deeper they walked, the more oppressive the feeling became, an overwhelming presence in the dark. It was impossible to keep track of time. He didn't notice the change, but at some point the black rock had given way to a polished obsidian surface, broken by veiny streaks of gold, like streaks of lightning breaking a stormy sky. And suddenly Tiberius stopped. "We've arrived, War Master," he declared. And indeed they had. Or at least they had reached a dead end, a solid wall. It didn't surprise him that Tiberius began speaking a strange invocation and golden runes flared to life, and the wall slid open without a sound, revealing a large natural cave ahead. This had to have been one of the legendary cities of the Deep Folk. The merchants spoke of them and their wondrous trinkets and machines, their cities of silver and gardens of rubies, wonderful stairs that spiraled down into the pits of the earth, grand halls decorated by the finest arts a smith could conjure. But this looked nothing alike. There were lodgings carved into the walls, and from mounds in the ground like the hives of ants, a sprawling primitive valley, where the shrouded figures went along with their purpose. High above, he could barely believe it, hung a moon at the invisible ceiling of the massive cave, bathing in a cold, apathetic light that was absorbed by the milky crystals that weakly gleamed protruding from the wall. and beneath the mock moon, wrought from the black stone, stood a terrible ziggurat. Tiberius led him through the winding streets. The honored outsider, the honored walked the streets of Uftakal, honored as I once was so many years ago. Tall spindly figures clothed in black robes, adorned by gilded thread, passed the ways, their faces hidden behind gruesome silvery death masks. They spoke in tongue to his guides unfit for man, but paid him no mind. Undoubtedly they were the Deepkin. His language had a word for them, Tuthuli, the cursed ones, the exiled. The absence of natural sound unnerved him. No wind, no birds, no rivers. Just the trotting of footsteps and the whirring of strange mechanisms. As they approached the temple towering above them, Sadul asked him, "What in the stars is this temple even dedicated to?" Tiberius stopped in his tracks. He seemed to ponder the question for a second and then answered, "There are no gods in this place. Come and you will see." Sadul did not know what the hell awaited him below ground, and he did not know what yet lay in store. He followed Tiberius through the titanic border of the temple, which was guarded by immense black statues of grisly skeletal warriors wrought from the same self-black stone. The inside was lit by pale blue torches, whose light let Tiberius seem even more cadaverous than he had before, drawing long shadows over his crazed eyes. He led him through a labyrinthian complex of wide corridors and tall chambers, until they reached a staircase leading into the bowels of the massive structure. The dark presence here was tangible, the air could be cut with a knife. Fear swelled in Sadul's chest. Would he die here, so far from home where the stars could not see him? They reached a large chamber, a shrine of sorts, bathed in pale golden light. Atop a staircase, on an ornate dais, a massive statue flying above the ground. It was cast from black stone, and streaks of gold ran through it, like veins, its massive form adorned by cracked obsidian wings like some unholy deity, its arms outstretched in a welcoming gesture, and a stone halo coronated its faceless visage, golden light shining brightly from it. Tiberius fell on his knees in reverence. "My lord, I have brought you the man as you have commanded me." Like a nightmare made manifest, the statue began to descend the stairs as if it weighed but a feather. A terrible voice echoed from the walls of his mind. From everywhere at once, manling it thundered, "You came to me to seek the power to deliver your people from the alien devils. That I cannot grant you, but I can give you the tools to take it for yourself." He had not known when it happened, but he found himself on his knees too, and bowed his head to the floor. The thing led him deeper down into a temple or a smith, or both by the looks of it. Sadul had never felt so frail in his life. Every move the thing made seemed of importance, every action deliberate and magnificent. His words seemed inadequate and would not leave his throat, the silence of the halls too important to disturb. The only noise, the muted trotting of their feet and the rushing of blood in his ears. Tiberius left to retrieve two things: a beautiful long knife made from ivory, and an immaculate red gemstone, the color of Saturnalia wine, of fresh blood seeping in the sands. The thing went to the forges that ignited with golden flames as by silent decree, but he could feel no heat, nor did smoke rise from the obsidian basin. Within the fires there was a cast mold, and the thing took the knife in its ebon hand and cut its own wrist, wherefrom a silver ichor bled into the mold. Sadul did not know how long he stood there awestruck while the thing forged blood into a crown. The mold was lifted from the flames by witchcraft and cast asunder to reveal a silver band. The thing then outreached its hand and worked its magic on it, lines forming and flowing into a beautiful mosaics and runes, from a time where the gods held no sway over the man's destiny. With a wave of its hand, the ruby worked itself into a socket at the front, nestled within the clutches of miniature figures with unparalleled detail. There was no smith in the realms that could have worked such a marvel. That was done, and it handed a crown towards Sadul. "This will deliver the man from the temple of the false gods. The price asked of you is only that you use it." Sadul took the crown, and thereby the deal was sealed. The voice echoed one last time, yet he would never forget the word it said. "There was a time our ancestors shared the same blood. Go now, Godslayer." When he returned to Kidathi, the city was covered in snow. Snow as far as he could see, and yet he did not feel the cold. He did not sleep or eat or rest at all. He had to fulfill his charge, as was written in the stars long before his birth. There was still no fire lit when he entered the Queen Hierophant's chambers once again, nor did she raise any protest when he took the key to the Grand Necropolis. Kadim had fallen at Sekre, abandoned by the gods, and his soul devoured by the Erlen, the city's people, cast in chains. Their souls might be forfeit, but he intended to keep his, and so Sadul somberly donned his armor and grabbed his spear. 2 stairs at a time he climbed the staircase to the necropolis, strut through the silvery gates, up and along the winding bridges and paths, through the many mausolea of long-forgotten dynasties, not thinking about the cataclysmic proportion of the deed that must be done. He would not have them be desecrated by a false god any longer. His muscles bulged and sweat dripped on the frozen floor as he wrought the gigantic silver door open. As a child he often marveled at the story of his people portrayed on it, dumbfounded at the thought what lay behind it. The incense was cold and the braziers frozen. There she was, monumental and regal, clad in the finest silk the G'day had to offer, golden jewelry the size of people wrapped around gigantic arms. Celianna, Sadul screamed. Our prayers have fallen on deaf ears. Heavy breath billowed forth into the cold air. Your lands lay in ruin, and your temples are silent. What answer you? Tell me, mortal, what more would you have of me? We gave you everything we had, and in our time of need you let our souls be butchered. If he shook with rage and fear, he knew what must be done. With wavering hands he donned a circlet. If you won't save our people, I will. The pain of the blade was more than he anticipated. With all of his might he fought every reflex in his body and pierced his chest with his spear, the weapon meant to protect the realm. The crown would keep him alive, well, long enough at least, he said. He could feel its sick power flashing through his veins instead of the blood that was rapidly pooling at his feet. Visions of the temple raced through his head as he drew the symbols into the air as he was taught. The elder words, he knew the meaning not, but they rolled from his lips regardless. The spell was cast and Celianna began to scream, "You're in league with this vile vermin, this vile Ka!" The words turned to screeches as chains of silver pierced both their chests. And so a new god rose from the ashes of the past. His flesh did not withstand the influx of cosmic power. The flames consumed it all, flesh, hair, blood, and at last, his humanity. The fledgling god's feet ascended the stairs to Celianna's corpse, and he cast her down, revealing what she so tenderly protected, the body of the fallen Demos. If he could have felt pity, he would have felt it now, but nothing stirred in his cold chest, now bereft of love or joy. He knew not of Kazarak's betrayal, and the foul runes wrought upon his silvery crown. He knew not what horror his new form would unleash upon the lands. He knew only his charge. And he stood on Celianna's throne, overseeing Kidathi and the lands beyond, and he knew it well. The first to rise was Demos. And indeed, Kidathi never fell to the Erlen. However, the newly coronated God King's reign was not one of prosperity for his people. The dead of the necropolis were called from Celianna's realm and took up arms, fighting horror with horror. Necromantic cults proliferated throughout the realm and tainted the land beyond repair, and once the G'day too were laid low during the fall of the gods, all that was left were ruins and cursed sand.